What's up everyone? So I just sold another property on the west side of Pleasanton. The house itself was 2,200 square feet and it ended up selling for $1,720,000. And I was able to match the seller and the buyer directly on this home, so it was completely sold off market. I want to give you the details on how that sale happened and what the condition of the home was in, so you're better informed on the real estate market and what you can expect to pay in Pleasanton. So the home itself was located on Chestnut Way in the Stone Ridge, Muirwood neighborhood of Pleasanton. That's located on the west side of the 680 freeway. That's very close to the Stone Ridge Mall, Lucky Supermarket, Leidixon Elementary School, and Foothill High School. So you're able to identify a general area of where the home was located. So the sellers called me about a month and a half ago expressing their interest in wanting to sell and move out of state to be closer to family. So when I met with them to walk their home and discuss what their circumstances were, I mentioned that I had a specific buyer in mind that I was representing who happened to love the neighborhood that their home was located in, and an off-market transaction would be a possibility. So you might be wondering, why exactly would an off-market transaction be a benefit to a seller in this crazy real estate market? Well, for one, the buyer who you're going to match with the seller has to be a realistic buyer and not trying to get a screaming deal, because in this real estate market, it's almost always better to take the house to market, unless of course you have a buyer who is realistic, who is willing to pay fair market value for the property. And in this case, I had a buyer who was. The other benefit to the seller was that they had a lot of stuff in the house, and for them to clear the home out so we could properly prep it for market was going to be a really big task and end up costing money in storage fees. So for the seller being able to avoid fully emptying the house so that we could paint it, stage it, get photos done, and all of the things that are required during a prepping process, this was a great option for them. It took us about a week and a half or 2 weeks to negotiate a final sales price and terms that matched and met both the seller's and buyer's needs. But after that week and a half, 2 weeks of negotiations, we finally landed on a price and terms that the seller and buyer were both pleased with. The other thing that the seller had to take in mind was that they were going to be saving money on a few items. One being commission cost to real estate agents, because most of the time when you work with one agent, there is a reduced commission amount rather than having two agents who need to be paid on a deal. The second thing they had to take into account was storage unit costs. They were going to be saving money on renting a storage unit to put all of their stuff in, and like I mentioned earlier, they had quite a bit of stuff that they've accumulated over the years of living in that home. Storage units usually have a deposit and then of course their monthly rents. So they knew that they were going to be saving those costs as well by avoiding having to move their stuff into the storage unit. Another item they were going to be saving money on was the cost of prepping the home. Now, if you list a home with me, my package includes some prepping costs, but not all. For example, when prepping a home for sale, I will usually pay out of my pocket any costs that requires paint touch-up, but not a full house paint job. In this case, the home would likely need to be painted on the interior, so they save those costs as well. Now on the flip side, the benefit to the buyer in this particular situation would be an opportunity to purchase a home off market. And if you've been looking to buy a home for the past 2 years, you know how crazy the competition has been. That's why it's important that if you're going to try to match a buyer to a seller in an off-market transaction, the buyer has to be realistic so they're not wasting anybody's time. Then obviously the seller's just going to take the home to market to try to get the most money possible. But in this scenario, it ended up working out perfectly. I had a realistic buyer and a seller who was able to take advantage of the off-market deal, so both parties were happy with the negotiated terms we came to. Now the home itself was just over 2,200 square feet, and the master bedroom and bathroom had an addition attached to it. So the original home was around 1,600 to 1,700 square feet. The side that got the addition, as well as part of that wing of the house, had been fully remodeled, including the laundry room. Also, the entire floor throughout the whole house had been new, as well as new interior doors, interior door casings or trim, and baseboard. The dining room and kitchen had not been remodeled, so that was not up to, say, 2022 design standards, but part of the back of the house as well as some of the bedrooms had been fully remodeled to 2022 design standards. So taking all of that into account, as well as the oversized premium lot that it was on, we landed on $1,720,000. It's also very important to note, if you're a seller going to sell off market, it's more important to understand what you're going to be netting after all expenses as opposed to final sales price. I know it's important for some people, especially real estate agents, to say they sold a home for X amount or X amount over the last previous sale. But what's most important to a seller is how much money they're going to be netting and taking everything into account. That would be final sales price minus any commissions paid, minus any prep costs that they incurred, as well as storage unit fees, etc. So although the purchase price may be less than the last previous sale, it's important to track and understand how much money the seller is actually going to be netting from the sale of their home, regardless of how much the sales price was. For example, let's say you're a home seller who's selling a home for $1 million and you're taking it to market. That means that you would have maybe $5,000 or $10,000 in painting fees if you had to have the property painted. That would also be another $50,000 in commission fees. As opposed to, let's say you sold a home for $990,000, but paid $35,000 in commission fees and didn't have to paint the house. That would mean that although your home sold for technically $10,000 less than the last previous sale, you would still be netting more money than the seller who sold the home for $1 million did. Now, of course, there are a ton of variables and every transaction is different. So it's very important that you sit down with your real estate agent and see which option would end up netting you more money. Now, in the case for the sellers of Chestnut Way, going off market and matching the correct buyer ended up being the better option. So that's what we went with. If you need my help buying and or selling a home in the Tri-Valley or San Ramon Valley areas, please reach out to me. Text or call me anytime. I always get back to you within 15 minutes if I don't answer right away. Thank you so much for watching.